There's a sound that history forgot to record. It's not the thunder of hooves or the clash of steel. It's the sound that came after, when the fires stopped burning, when the screaming stopped, when the men who could fight were already dead, and the women realized the war hadn't ended. It had just changed into something worse. What I'm about to tell you isn't a story about war. It's a story about the most efficient system of cultural genocide ever created. A machine so perfectly designed that it didn't just conquer empires, it erased them from existence. And at the center of this machine, a calculated, state-sponsored brutality aimed at one target: women. This is going to disturb you. It should. Because about 16 million people alive today carry the genetic proof that it worked. Their DNA is a living record of what happened when an entire civilization decided that terror wasn't just a side effect of conquest, it was the primary weapon. And here's what makes your blood run cold. They didn't just stumble upon this strategy, they refined it, they perfected it. They turned human suffering into a science. By the end of this video, you'll understand why cities with populations of 500,000 people simply vanished from history, why entire languages went extinct, why cultures that had flourished for thousands of years ceased to exist within a single generation. And you'll understand the horrifying role that women played, not as warriors or rulers, but as the targets of the most systematic campaign of cultural destruction the medieval world had ever seen. This is the Mongol terror machine. And once you see how it worked, you'll never look at history the same way again. If you believe that the lessons of history's most fearsome figures should never be forgotten, consider liking this video and subscribing. Your support brings more stories from the shadows of our past now, back to the machine that turned cruelty into a science. Let me ask you something that historians have debated for centuries. How did a nomadic people, with a population of maybe 1 million, conquer an empire spanning from Korea to Hungary? How did they subjugate kingdoms with populations 50 times their size? The answer isn't what you think. It wasn't superior tactics. It wasn't better weapons. It wasn't even the legendary Mongol cavalry. It was terror, but not random terror. This was engineered terror. Terror as a technology. Terror as a weapon more powerful than any siege engine ever built. And here's what makes your skin crawl. The evidence suggests they learned to perfect this system by trial and error, by testing different approaches, by measuring which specific atrocities made cities surrender fastest. They were scientists of suffering, and their laboratory was the known world. In 1219, before the invasion of Khwarezmia, Genghis Khan sent emissaries ahead with a simple message: whoever submits shall be spared, but those who resist, they shall be destroyed with their wives, children and dependents. Descendants will be put to the sword. Notice the language. Wives, children and dependents get their own claws. That's not accidental. That's the promise of something worse than death. This wasn't a threat made in anger. This was policy. This was advertised. And critically, they wanted you to know what was coming. Fear, they understood, travels faster than horses. Here's the brutal calculation. You have 50,000 soldiers. Ahead of you are 12 fortified cities. Each would cost you thousands of lives to take by force. Or you make an example of one city so horrific that the other 11 open their gates without a fight. You spend your brutality once, like currency, and it purchases the surrender of a dozen cities. It's monstrous, it's evil, and it's mathematically brilliant. And this is where it gets truly disturbing. They specifically chose cities known for their culture, their learning, their religious significance, places like Nishapur, famous across the Islamic world for its poetry and mathematics. Or Merv, one of the largest cities on earth at the time. Why these cities? Because the destruction had to hurt symbolically. It had to destroy hope. When you erase one of the greatest cities in the world, every other city thinks, if it happened to them, what chance do we have? When Nishapur fell in 1221, the Mongols ordered a body count. Every single person was to be killed, and every head was to be piled in separate pyramids, one for men, one for women, one for children. The daughter of Genghis Khan's son-in-law personally oversaw the execution of the women and children. She wanted to make sure the job was thorough. When archaeologists excavated the site in the 20th century, they found a layer of ash several feet deep, covering artifacts from one of history's greatest cities. But here's what most documentaries won't tell you. The killing was the easy part. The killing was mercy. For the women who were spared, their nightmare was just beginning. The Mongol system for breaking conquered peoples wasn't random cruelty. This was a carefully orchestrated process. 5 deliberate acts, executed in sequence, each designed to unmake not just a city, but a civilization. Let me walk you through each one. I'm going to tell you about a weapon so effective that 800 years later, we can still detect its impact by analyzing the DNA of people living today. The systematic use of forced reproduction as a tool of genetic conquest. When a city fell, women weren't killed, they were sorted, like livestock, like treasure. The most beautiful, the most noble, the daughters of kings and scholars. They were claimed by Mongol commanders. But this wasn't about desire. This was about replacement. Here's the strategy. When you force captive women to bear your children, you're not just conquering the present, you're conquering the future. Those children are raised Mongol. They speak Mongolian. They worship Tengri, the sky god. Their mother's language, forgotten. Her gods, forbidden. Her stories, lost in a single generation. It's annihilation without ruins, genocide without graves. In 2003, geneticists identified a Y chromosomal lineage that originated in Mongolia approximately 1,000 years ago. The estimate, 16 million men alive today carry this genetic signature. That's roughly 0.5% of all men on Earth sharing a single male ancestor from the Mongol imperial period. One genetic lineage spreading across Asia in just a few generations. This isn't natural population growth. This is the genetic signature of conquest. But let's make this concrete. Imagine you're a Persian noblewoman in Nishapur in 1221. You're 23 years old. You've been educated, you read poetry, you study astronomy. Your marriage has been arranged to a prominent merchant's son. Then the Mongols come. Your husband is killed. Your father is executed. Your brothers are in those pyramids outside the city walls. You are pulled from your home and examined like a horse at auction. A Mongol officer claims you. You don't speak his language. He doesn't care about your name. 9 months later, you give birth to his child, a son. He takes the baby from you. The child will be raised in a ger on the steppe. He will learn to ride before he can walk. He will never know your poetry. He will never pray in your language. He will never even know what city his mother came from. That is the first act of erasure. You continue to breathe, but everything you were, your lineage, your culture, your future, is already dead. And this happened to tens of thousands of women, city after city, nation after nation. But the Mongols understood something crucial. You can't just erase a people's future. You have to destroy their present. You have to break their spirit so completely that they lose the will to resist. That's where the second act comes in, and it was performed in public on purpose as theatre. There's a reason why psychological humiliation is considered one of the most devastating forms of warfare. The Mongols perfected it at industrial scale. They understood that a culture's honor was inseparable from the protection of its women. The Mongols identified this as a pressure point and applied force with surgical precision. Let me tell you about February 13th, 1258, when Baghdad fell. This wasn't just any city. This was the seat of the Abbasid Caliphate, the center of Islamic civilization, home to the House of Wisdom, where scholars had preserved and advanced human knowledge for 5 centuries. The Mongols under Hulagu Khan besieged the city. When the walls fell, estimates suggest between 200,000 to 1 million dead. The Tigris River reportedly ran black with ink from destroyed books, then red with blood. But here's where the true genius of Mongol psychological warfare reveals itself. The women of the Caliph's palace, women who had never been seen by public eyes, who lived their entire lives in seclusion, who were considered almost holy. These women were dragged into the streets. Their veils were torn away, their clothing was stripped, and they were paraded through the markets. These were the mothers, wives, and daughters of the man who claimed spiritual authority over hundreds of millions of Muslims. To see them exposed, humiliated, degraded, it wasn't just an assault on those individual women. It was a message. Your leaders cannot protect even those closest to them. Your God did not intervene. Your civilization is already dead. You're just still breathing. The women were then sold in slave markets, some for as little as a single silver coin. The price wasn't about economics. It was about contempt. For the men who survived, this was a wound that never healed. You didn't just lose the war. You lost your identity as a protector. And here's what makes this calculated. The Mongols didn't do this everywhere. Cities that surrendered early were often spared. The humiliation was advertised ahead of the army surrender, and you keep your dignity. Resist and we'll make sure your grandchildren feel ashamed to speak your name. This is terror as technology, as a system. But we're only at the second act. I'm about to describe a siege tactic so brutal that when Persian historians first recorded it, readers assumed it must be exaggeration, but multiple sources confirm it. The tactic was called karash in Persian, translating to human cattle or living boards. The Mongols would conquer City A, then keep captives alive, not out of mercy, for logistics. When besieging City B, these captives would be driven forward at sword points toward the walls, women with babies, elderly people, children, all forced to advance as the Mongol army assembled behind this human barrier. The defenders faced an impossible choice: shoot and kill your own people, or hold fire and watch the Mongols advance siege equipment using human shields. Either choice destroyed morale. This tactic achieved multiple objectives: physical protection for Mongol soldiers, psychological warfare that gave defenders no good options, and practical efficiency, as the bodies of those who fell were piled into moats, literally used as fill to create ramps for siege towers. If you were a captive woman, your final purpose might be to fall into a moat and have your corpse used as a bridge, so the men who enslaved you could walk over your dead body to enslave the next city. You weren't a person. You were construction material, an expendable resource measured in bodies. The Persian historian Juvaini recorded multiple instances of this. The Secret History of the Mongols references it. Chinese and Russian sources describe the same practice. Archaeological excavations have found mass graves at the base of city walls, people killed by defensive fire from above. The human shield was doctrine. If you survived the siege, your reward was a 1,000-mile death march to be sold in a slave market. Welcome to the fourth act, the greatest forced migration in human history. The Mongol Empire stretched from the Pacific to Eastern Europe. It ran on a currency more valuable than silver: human beings. After each conquest, the sorting began. Skilled artisans sent to Karakoram, laborers sent to work camps. Women, especially young women, were the most sought-after commodity in slave markets. When Genghis Khan invaded the Khwarezmian Empire between 1219 and 1221, the population dropped from 15 million to less than 7 million. Where did those 8 million people go? Many were marched to slave markets across Asia. Women from Uzbekistan ended up in Mongolia. Women from Baghdad ended up in China. The Mongol Empire created the most efficient slave trade system since Rome. In Samarkand, slave markets became permanent institutions with standardized pricing and even warranties. If a slave died within the first month, you could get a refund. These markets existed for generations. By the late 13th century, there were merchants whose entire business, across multiple generations, was buying and selling human beings. A woman from Nishapur could end up sold in China, 4,000 miles away. Her children would never know her homeland. Her grandchildren wouldn't even know what language she had spoken. Entire ethnic groups were scattered so